If I were to start putting out pamphlets and brochures and books saying, I'm going to talk about Bible prophecy, and we're going to talk about, apocalyptic, cataclysmic, cosmic stuff that's going to happen in the future, I'd fill it to commando. If you say, let's talk about righteous living here and now, people go, I'm not much interested. That's okay. No real need for that. But we want to be titillated. We want to have our ears tickled with what's going to happen here. What's going to happen here? What's the future hold here? How about this? How about that? All this. Now the prophets give us some of that. The prophets do give it. By the way, I'll give you an example of this. Looking at Micah again. Let me talk about distant future. Let's talk about distant future and distant future and even further distant future. Look at Micah. Let me show you an example. Go back to Micah just for a second. Look at Micah chapter 5. Look at this. Remember what I said. Walter Kaiser said, I read the New Testament once. I liked it. It reminded me of the Old Testament. This is Micah 5:2. Listen to Micah 5:2. But you, Bethlehem Ephratah, though you are little among the thousands of Judah, yet out of you shall come forth to me the one to be ruler in Israel, whose goings forth are from old, from everlasting. I'm reading Micah. I can tell you he's going to be born in Bethlehem. I can tell you where Yeshua is going to be born. Okay, long before we ever got to the Apostolic Scriptures. I can look for him in Bethlehem. And in fact, this verse is quoted when Herod says, hey, where's this kid going to be born? You guys say it's coming. They say, well, the prophet Micah tells us it's going to be in Bethlehem. That's where it's going to be. Oh, okay. Got to read the prophets. Okay? Look at this. He is, whose goings forth are from old, from everlasting. This isn't just any child. Now, look at the end of, go back with me in Micah, and look at verse 12. Micah chapter 2, verse 12. Just to give you some examples. Look what he says. I will surely assemble all of you, O Jacob. I will surely gather the remnant of Israel. I will put them together like sheep of the fold, like a flock in the midst of their pasture. They shall make a loud noise because of so many people. Now look at this. The one who breaks open will come up before them. They will break out, pass through the gate, and go by it. Their king will pass before them with the Lord at their head. There's one who's going to come, who's going to make a way for Jacob and Israel. He's going to come and speak to Jacob and Israel. He's going to be the one who breaks the wall down that allows the sheep to come out of the pen. This is a prophecy Micah gives about the future coming of Yeshua and what he will do. He will be the breaker. He will break down the walls that allows Judah and Israel to be the nation that they're supposed to be. Prophecy, okay? He's going to be the breaker. I think you have a text in the Apostolic Scriptures that refers to this, but it's been so mistranslated and so jumbled that you can't even see it anymore. We'll talk about that later on. Now, look at chapter 4, verse 1. Look at chapter 4, verse 1. Remember what I said about phraseology? Let me show you what I'm talking about. Look at chapter 4, verse 1 of Micah. It says this. V'haya, and it will be v'akarit yamin, at the end of days. Now look what he says. Now he's going to quote, we have the prophets that are dealing with similar material. I don't know whether Isaiah is borrowing from Micah, or if Micah is borrowing from Isaiah, or if they've got a common source. But I'll tell you this, they both say the same thing. Look at what he says. It shall come to pass in the latter days that the mountain of the Lord's house, what's that about? Mount Zion, in Jerusalem, shall be established on the top of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills, and many people shall flow to it. Many nations shall come up and say, come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob. And he will teach us his ways, and we shall walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth, and for the Torah shall go out of Zion, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He shall judge between many peoples, and rebuke strong nations from afar. They shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. That's Isaiah 2:2-4. They're both quoting, but this is the end of days. This is Acharit Yamim. This is future prophecy that's way down the line. Micah 5:2, there's one coming who's going to be born in Bethlehem. He's from of old. Okay? And he's going to also be the one who's the breaker. He's going to make a way for Judah and Israel to be one flock. And he's going to lead them and pasture them. He's the breaker. These sheep have been penned up. He's going to speak to the house of Judah and the house of Israel. This is near prophecy. But it's still, even from the time of Micah, we're 8th century. It's still 700 years plus in the future. Then he says, just like Isaiah does, here's even a further prophecy that goes out to the end of days. And he's telling us this in the 8th century. This is prophecy. Okay? I'm just giving you how the prophets talk about the future. Now, we haven't even looked at the near future. And Micah's going to tell us some things that are going to happen in the near future as well. The very near future. So he's going to tell us about the near future. He's going to tell us about the time of Messiah on this earth. And then he's going to shoot beyond that and tell us about things that are going to happen at the very end of days. This is how the prophets work. Are you with me? Okay. Questions, comments? The other big clue word, and since Micah uses it, look at Micah chapter 4, verse 6. Here is where you know that we're dealing with, again, this eschatological time period. Look at what he says in verse 6. Biyom hahu ne'um yohevafe. In that day, declares the Lord, I will gather. Look at this. He says, I will assemble the lame and gather the outcast, and those whom I have afflicted. I will make the lame a remnant and the outcast a strong nation. I mean, he's talking about the future. He's not through with his people. Yes?
You're speaking about how Isaiah and Micah both basically said the same thing. But if the word of the Lord came up to those prophets, and the word is Yeshua, you would expect him to say the same thing in Isaiah's day as he would say in Micah's day.
Well, Isaiah and Micah are contemporaries.
Yes.
That's my point, is that they are, it's the very same. I mean, I did a comparison of the two, looking at Micah and looking at Isaiah. There's only a few words difference here and there. I mean, real minute differences. Nothing that I would say is, significant. But it's interesting because then people say, well, is Isaiah quoting Micah? Is Micah quoting Isaiah? Or do they have a third source that we don't even know about that they're
Yeshua.
referencing? Yeah,
they're all quoting Yeshua.
Yeah. So
he is the word.
Yes. And so this word of the Lord is interesting because the word of the Lord takes on a personification. It becomes almost an entity unto itself. The word of the Lord comes to. And you can say it a number of ways. You can say it like we see here in Micah, the word of the Lord came. Does it come in a vision? Does it come in a dream? Doesn't matter. Either way, here's what the word of the Lord says. And he places this in historical reference because he says, when the kings of Judah, Jotham, Ahaz, Hezekiah, this is the time frame. We're talking about Hezekiah. We're just told, 2 Chronicles 29, he reigned for 29 years. His father and his grandfather reigned for 6 years each. So 12 years, 29, so what's that? 29 and 12.
51.
Thank you. So that's the time period that
41.
41.
You said, 29.
Yeah.
29, sorry, 41.
Those
So
map
41
pages
year
over
period is the time period that Micah is prophesying over the period of these three kings. Okay, so that's the time period we're dealing with, 8th century. Northern kingdom has just gone into captivity with Assyria. Southern kingdom, 586. So we're counting down. It's going to happen. And Micah's telling us it's definitely going to happen. It's a done deal. The beauty of Micah, though, is this. He says this. God has a remnant. God has a remnant. And he will be faithful to that remnant. And they will return back to their land. They will come back. He's not forgotten them. He has not forgotten them. And in fact, he then talks about God's faithfulness to the covenant to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Micah takes it back to that and says, God has not forgotten his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He will never forget that covenant. So this is the message of Micah. I mean, we're going to continue working through Micah because I think we need to understand these prophets. We need to understand the prophetic texts and what they have to say. There's so much in them. You love Micah. I know you do because Micah, we get to Micah 6:8, he says, he has shown you, O man, what is good and what the Lord requires of you, but to do justice and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God. That's Micah. Mm-hmm. So it's a great text. It has tons of stuff in it. You know. Any questions or comments? So this part right here. We're going to continue studying and working through Micah because I think we need to understand. Micah ties us into three other prophets. Not only that, but Jeremiah. Jeremiah later on quotes from Micah and says, hey, by the way, Micah's already told you this. So Jeremiah is aware of what Micah has said. And he in fact says as much. He says, didn't Micah already say this to you? So the prophets are aware of each other and are, in a sense, talking to each other. I think that's fascinating. It's this intertextual dialogue that's going on between the prophets. Any questions or comments? Are you asleep? Okay. Rest on, okay? Take your naps.
It is a Sabbath.
Huh?
It is a Sabbath.
Questions, comments, anything?
Well, what was interesting is in the Northern Kingdom, all of the kings the change occurred by assassination.
Yes.
Whereas in the Southern Kingdom, it's hereditary,
Right.
you know.
Oh yeah, the Northern Kingdom is the Northern Kingdom. I mean, you read the history of the Northern Kingdom, and you're like you said, it's one assassination right after the other. These guys are only. I mean, if you reign for 2 years in Israel, that's like an eternity, because somebody is. As soon as you ascend to the throne, somebody is aiming to take you out, or somebody's. And so, you get a king in the Northern Kingdom that lasts for 2 years. That's like, you know, they're going through them like, you know. Whereas, like you said, it's dynastic in the Southern Kingdom, and so it's going to the next person that lives in that family. So, a much different approach. Not that they're not liked, but.
Well, and in the Northern Kingdom, there were no good kings.
Yeah. You only have 2 good ones in, we just looked at one, Hezekiah. The only other good king you have is Josiah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Jehoshaphat, no?
Yeah, jury's still out on him.
There
But
were still some, you know.
Hezekiah is good, does some reforms. Josiah, what's interesting about Josiah is we know that he gets a copy of the book of Deuteronomy. We don't know what other books he got, but he gets the book of Deuteronomy. And we know that because it says, regarding Josiah, that he found this text that says that you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and it quotes from Deuteronomy 6:5. So we know, and it's the same verbiage, so we know that he had Deuteronomy. Which Deuteronomy is a fascinating text. I mean, massive text.
And they just found it.
Yeah, so you know, he says they start reading Deuteronomy and he starts doing reforms, which begs the question: where, for Northern Kingdom and Southern Kingdom, where are the where are those who are supposed to be teaching the truth and supposed to be copying the text? How come we don't have more text and more people standing up to say, hey, this is what we should be doing. This is what was written. Yes.
Well, where's the king writing them out like they're supposed to per Torah?
Yes.
So
the
this
kings
was-
were supposed to write a Torah scroll for themselves, according to Deuteronomy. They're not writing if the king doesn't know the Torah, in fact, that's the point. If Josiah was the kind of king he was supposed to be, he would have written a Torah scroll.
Right.
Same thing with Hezekiah. If your king writes his own Torah scroll, the likelihood of him forgetting Torah is very almost non-existent, because he's going to at least know what the Torah said, that he's written it. If you write out that Torah scroll, you know what the word of the Lord says. He's supposed to have his own copy with him. Yes.
Now, Josiah became king very young. I think
Yes.
was he 8 years old?
Yeah.
Is it possible that he had some Levitical influence to maybe help with this? Because, I mean, here's a young kid who becomes king, and for some reason, who at 8 years old is going to think, oh, I should repent? That's not a norm.
No. It
So
actually
he had some
happens.
influence somewhere.
He has people, handlers, and he also
Yeah.
has people, as he gets older, that are helping him.
Yeah, so I'm saying there must be some little bit, because everything he does, well, not every, but most of what he does, seems to, once he grabs hold of Torah, he runs with it. So there's somebody who's guiding him and instructing him and aiding in that.
Yeah, and you
It
notice
seems
what
like.
and you notice what Hezekiah does. Hezekiah does it right. He gets the priests together, and he says, "Guys, I need you guys to start doing your job. You tell me what you need, and I'll get you what you need. You tell me the animals you need for the sacrifices to do the consecration. Fine. I want you to get in there and clean this temple out. Take all the stuff my father." Wait, that says something to us, doesn't it? I mean, about maybe. See, now here's, on one hand, this is the kind of disconnect I'm talking about. On one hand, Hezekiah says, "Get rid of the stuff my father did that messed us up." On the other hand, he says, it's not going to happen. Nothing bad going to happen in our day. He's conflicted. It's like, prior generation, we need to clean that up, and he's right. What's coming? Okay, we messed up. Okay, Sarah. Not going to happen in my day. I think we should have the approach, the biblical approach is, for everybody, what can I do to improve what my father did, to make it better, clean it up? And what can I do to make sure that it's cleaned up so that the next generation steps into something that's already clean, and it's already heading the right direction? He has to, see, here's the problem. You can't begin heading in the right direction until you clean up the stuff that's messed up from the past. He has to go in and say, let's clean up the temple, let's get this thing refurbished, let's clean it all out. It's got all kinds of junk in it, but my father left there, that my father brought in. That's really a metaphor for a lot of lives, and that is that we have so much junk from our past that we don't get out, and then what ends up happening is we get some things cleaned up, and then we say, well, you know what, let the next generation deal with it. As long as things are okay for me, they can deal with the problems. I want to say, let's clean up the stuff that we need to clean up, and then let's keep moving that direction so that the next generation can just step into something that's already clean and say, we can launch from here and do more for God, because we already have a clean slate that we're working from. How much multi-generational nonsense do we have that causes us problems? And if you look at Hezekiah, you say you got problems on both ends. Questions or comments? All right. Is Kirk around?